Nothing in the Lou Brydges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history that created it. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Brydges will explain options in the foreclosure process. He'll talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou's dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now, it's time for the Lou Brydges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Brydges.
Good morning, Chicago. The jury has spoken this past week. And in the Fabrice Tourre trial in New York, Mr. Fabrice Tourre, a former Goldman Sachs trader involved in sponsoring and putting together mortgage-backed securities, was found guilty on 6 of 7 counts. Now, this was not a criminal trial. Criminal trials have not been brought yet. There will be, with the exception of Angelo Mazzillo and the former head of Taylor Bean Financial, the mortgage broker. There's been no major convictions of crimes. Hopefully there will be, although the statutes of limitation are running. But in the Fabrice Tourre trial, the former Goldman Sachs trader was found guilty on 6 of 7 counts in a civil lawsuit by the jury. And it's a very complex case. And I'm going to read to you from the New York Times. When 9 New York residents shuffled into a cramped courtroom in federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan on Wednesday, they were divided over Mr. Fabrice Tourre's culpability on the toxic mortgage deal sold to investors. Then, over more than 13 hours, the 5 men and 4 women pored over reams of disclosure documents that Mr. Tourre and his employer Goldman Sachs had provided to investors in 2007. Grappling with the nuances, tension mounted among the 9, which included educators, a stockbroker, an Episcopal priest, and a digital advertising employee. The deliberations dragged on. It got very intense. Finally, at 3:12 p.m. on Thursday, the jury reached a verdict. Mr. Tourre, they decided, was liable on 6 of the 7 counts. Interviews with the 5 of the 9 jurors afterwards, an eclectic group spread across New York, gave revealings. The jury expressed sympathy for Mr. Tourre. He's a very handsome young man. By age 27, he was making over $300 million per year working for Goldman Sachs. Part of the problem that I've pointed out that our best and brightest now go into shuffling paper and making these complex financial instruments, which are essentially running a casino and stripping the American public of their wealth, their property. Exactly what Thomas Jefferson warned. Perhaps I should read the Thomas Jefferson quote that we read on every show at this point. In 1802, Thomas Jefferson warned future generations of America. He said, in light of the current financial crisis, I believe the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow the private banks to control the issue of currency, then the banks and the corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. And that is happening today, and that's been happening now since the 2008 crisis. 5 years now, we're into it. We're still seeing record numbers of foreclosure lawsuits filed, vacant homes, entire subdivisions in Florida, in Nevada, vacant, while children are being raised in the backs of pickup trucks, and it's spreading, here in Illinois. There are more foreclosures, and again, these foreclosures are based on fraudulent documents, forged documents, fabricated documents. There was unlawful, deceptive inducement in the origination of the mortgage, inflated appraisals. This is not a situation that came about because 56 million American families woke up one morning and decided to commit bank fraud that day. The notion of there being liar loans, the only liar loans I've seen, and I've examined over 1,000 now, have been where the originators altered numbers on the application. The originators fill out the application, and they are the ones that alter the numbers. In every case that I've seen. But In this case, this Fabrice Tourre trial reminded me so much, and I went back and I looked at a movie I saw when I was a youngster. It inspired me very much to become a lawyer, and maybe some of you have seen it. It's called The Verdict. Paul Newman plays a down-and-out personal injury attorney, alcoholic, seen better days. The opening of the movie, they finds him at a wake where he's gone to he's in the death notices in the newspapers, and he goes to these wakes and where there's been somebody who's died as a result of an automobile accident or something, and pretends to be a mourner. Meanwhile, he starts passing out his business card, hoping to get a PI case out of it. Well, in this one, he's recognized for not having known the decedent and just passing out his business card. So it being Boston, some of the local Irish take care of things in their own manner, and he gets beaten up and thrown out. He goes to the bar. But he does have one case, and it's a case that reminds me very much of like the foreclosure cases we defend. It's a case in which he's going after a renowned, supposedly trusted institution. It's a medical malpractice case in which a young woman went into the hospital that is owned by the Catholic Archdiocese of Boston, and the doctors there give her the wrong anesthetic, and she vomits into her mask and suffocates as a result and is rendered brain dead, essentially, but still alive, and for the rest of her life. Her sister and brother-in-law had hired another attorney who referred the case to Mr. Frank Galvin, played by Paul Newman. And during the course of the trial, things don't go well for Frank Galvin. The judge, of course, is one of the old boys that is protecting the archdiocese, and every ruling goes against him. He forces him to trial 5 days early. His key witness is out of town. He denies him a motion for continuance. He makes evidentiary rulings against him. He bars his expert witness because even though he's a professor of medicine and testifies exactly what happened and where the doctors had failed to notice that the woman had eaten a meal within 2 hours of being admitted and therefore should have been given a different type of anesthetic, they gave her the type of anesthetic that you should only give someone who has an empty stomach. And the anesthetic they gave her causes nausea and vomiting, and thus the danger of suffocating in your own vomit in the mask. And after all that testimony, the defense, which is defense attorney, is played brilliantly by James Mason and has a whole team of associate attorneys and researchers and investigators, and they come up with some obscure case which a judge interprets as barring this expert witness from testifying because he's never actually practiced law or medicine in Massachusetts. He's only a renowned professor of medicine and knew exactly what happened and told the jury where the doctors had screwed up, but his testimony is barred and the jury's told to disregard it. They're also told to disregard testimony where it comes in from a nurse, that is, Frank Galvin finds. The nurse no longer is working in nursing. She's a school teacher now. She's got a nursing. And she says, yes, on the intake form, I interviewed the Mrs., I can't think of the name of the woman, who was delivering the baby, and she said she told me she had eaten 2 hours ago. And the intake form says that last time, when did you last eat? 8 hours ago. Galvin says, well, why did you write down an 8? And she says, I didn't. I wrote down a 2. And he says, well, it says here 8 hours on the intake form. And she said, the doctor told me to change it. The doctor told me that he had delivered 8 babies that day and had a rough day, and he had just glanced over the intake sheet, and he didn't notice where it said 2 hours. So he told me to change it to 8. So Frank Galvin puts her on the stand, and she testifies to this in a very dramatic testimony. And she said, the doctor told me I had to change the 2 to an 8, or else I'd never practice, I'd never be a nurse again. And then she says very dramatically, who were these men? I wanted to be a nurse. And she wasn't. So we're going to break, and I'm going to read to you the final argument that Paul Newman gave to the jury in that case, because I think it's very relevant today. He was up against a lot of the same things that we were up at the beginning of this foreclosure crisis. Judges that were giving the banks, supposedly trusted institutions, every benefit of every doubt, every ruling in their favor. They weren't required to prove up things. And as it turned out, it led to probably at least a million wrongful foreclosures around the country. People wrongfully dispossessed of their homes. And now we're finding out that, lo and behold, they don't have the note. They don't have the mortgage transferred. It wasn't securitized properly, which means that the trust that owns it doesn't. I need to emphasize that we are not ever trying to get somebody their home free and clear of a mortgage. We are pointing out deficiencies in the mortgage, deficiencies in the origination, fraud in the origination, unlawful inducement in the origination, and using that as leverage to negotiate a fair deal based on the true fair market value of the property. Our objective in our cases is to get people a fair mortgage based on the true fair market value. Not a situation where you're paying a $250,000 mortgage on a house that's worth $150,000 or a $350,000 on a house that's worth $200,000, as so many millions of Americans are. 20 million American families are overpaying by about $1,000 per month on their mortgage. These families are and they're losing their property. They're depriving their families of the things that a family should have, and their children. But things are changing now, and it's changing because of courageous judges, and there's a few lawyers that are around. I'm proud to be one of them. When we stick with us, come back. I'm going to read you the final argument by Paul Newman as Frank Galvin in the movie The Verdict.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Lou Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back, listeners. Before we broke, I was trying to set up the Paul Newman summation in the movie The Verdict, and I hope if you're just joining us, it's a movie in which Paul Newman plays a down-and-out personal injury attorney. And I think what he says in this summation is so very apropos to what we were doing. And it's really what this whole show is all about. Because I've been always saying the lies have got to stop. They will, because the lies have been piled on the lies. The foreclosure crisis, the Wall Street greed, the Fabrice Tourre conviction. It reminded me of why I became an attorney. I remembered when I saw this movie when I was just I think a teenager. I think it came out in the mid-'70s when I was in college or high school or something. And Galvin's, he's lost every ruling, and the case is really lost. And he has a prepared final argument summation, but he kind of crumples up the paper and he doesn't use it, and then he just speaks from his heart. And I was going to read to you, but Debbie Schreiber, our brilliant producer, actually found a clip, and she's going to play it for you. Now it's old and it's not really good sound, so you're going to have to listen carefully. And then afterwards, I'll read you the words. But listen to this. This is Frank Galvin's summation to the jury in a medical malpractice case against a big institution that committed malpractice. Its doctors committed malpractice and tried to buy him off for cheap money. And the judge made every ruling against him because he was, part of that old boy network that protected this institution. Debbie, without any further ado, why don't you read Paul Newman as Frank Galvin giving his summation to the jury in the movie The Verdict.
Mr. Galvin. Mr. Galvin, summation. So much of the time we're just lost. We say, please, God, tell us what is right, tell us what is true. I mean, there is no justice. The rich win, the poor are powerless. We become tired of hearing people lie. And after a time, we become dead. A little dead. We think of ourselves as victims. And we become victims. We become weak. We doubt ourselves, we doubt our beliefs. We doubt our institutions. And we doubt the law. not some book, not the lawyers, not a marble statue, or the trappings of the court. See, those are just symbols of our desire to be just. They are in fact a prayer. A fervent and a frightened prayer. In my religion, they say act as if you had faith. Faith will be given to you. If we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe in ourselves and act with justice. See, I believe there is justice in our hearts.
That's Frank Galvin giving his summation in the movie The Verdict. And I played that for you because I'm reminded from the conviction in New York, where those of you who have been following the Fabrice Tourre trial, the former Goldman Sachs mortgage-backed security trader who was found guilty this past week on 6 or 7 counts on a case brought by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And ultimately, the jurors said that their decision came down to what they saw as the letter of the law, and for some, a broader concern that Mr. Tourre's action underscored a fundamental problem with our society: Wall Street greed. Here's what Wall Street is all about. You see, what Fabrice did, for those you don't know, is he put together mortgage-backed securities, 2,500 mortgages, and they were sold to a public employee retirement fund that was protected with a credit default swap, but they were purposely made these mortgages that were destined to fail, because they made the real big money buying the credit default swap, the derivative, making a bet that what they put together and sold to investors would have a large number of defaults, would fail. See, the credit default swaps made it profitable for Wall Street to bundle and package mortgages for far more than the property was worth that were destined to lead to foreclosures. And they did so by getting two things, doing whatever they had to do to get two things: your signature on a note and mortgage. They engaged in massive fraud, illegal activities, violations of federal laws, everything from the appraisal to the application to what they told you about, don't worry about the adjustable rate. When the adjustable rate kicks in 2 years, we'll get you a new mortgage, and you pay off the old mortgage, and you walk out of the closing because your house will be worth 20% more. And I mean, people are going to fall for that, and did in massive numbers. 20 million people are still underwater with their mortgage, but there is something you can do with it. You can fight back. And what we're getting into now, my partner Scott O and I, are consumer fraud lawsuits. In addition to defending your foreclosure lawsuit, very likely, if the evidence warrants, which it almost always does, I'm telling you, any mortgage that was originated between 1998 and 2008, our investigators find and document and give us a report that shows substantial violations of federal regulations. This was done intentionally to induce you to sign those mortgages because they wanted it to fail, because they could make money betting that these mortgages would fail. It's like betting on the sun rising in the east in the morning. And that is wrong. I don't know much, but I know when something's wrong, and something's wrong about this. And there is something you can do about it, because this past week, on that day, that jury was the law, and they found something was wrong. And Mr. Fabrice, I hope, he's still a young man, and maybe now he'll see that all his brilliance and talents, he would be better put to use trying to build on his, to contribute to his people, to his community, rather than just trying to rip them off. And the problem is all of our best and brightest seem to go to Wall Street and make money ripping off the American public. And the government and the courts have thus far been allowing it and sanctioning it. But that is all changing because judges are now seeing they don't want to be the judge in the verdict. They don't want to be remembered as that judge. They don't want to be referred to as the marble statue. They want to be the guy that you make a marble statue out of. So the judges are now starting to recognize what we've been arguing to them for 4 years. Look, here's the evidence. This mortgage was unlawfully induced. This mortgage wasn't properly securitized. The plaintiff doesn't own the mortgage. The bank doesn't own it. They're the servicer. That's why they've been sabotaging the modification efforts. If you allow us to plead our affirmative defenses, force them to answer them, they can't answer them. They cannot answer our affirmative defenses. We plead our affirmative defenses, we get a restructuring. We got 5 more this past week. Reductions of principal balance, 100,000, 80,000, 60,000. And we're getting them more and more. One of my competitors has a website where he lists 200 more, I invite him. There's more than enough business for everybody who knows what they're doing. There aren't that many lawyers who know what they're doing. In the next segment, we're going to talk about what to look about in hiring a foreclosure defense attorney. But in the meantime, just remember, today, you are the law. And if you stand up and fight for your property and not just give it up and not just feel that I'm the one who's to blame because I can't pay my mortgage, I'm the one who's to blame because I'm underwater, never give up the land. Fight for truth and justice. You do that and you'll never be alone. I'm Lou Brydges. We'll be back after sports.
Louis Brydges of the law firm Brydges & O & Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Brydges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Welcome back, listeners. We've been talking about the Frank Tourre conviction in New York, the Goldman Sachs mortgage-backed security trader who was found guilty of putting together mortgages or more mortgage-backed securities that were designed to fail because they were making bets, buying investment hedges that were actually essentially betting against what they had put together and sold to investors, which is what the whole mortgage-backed security, the whole mortgage foreclosure crisis is about. You were duped into a mortgage that was designed to fail, and you were duped by unlawful activities. Now, Mike, my wingman here, I haven't given him a chance. He always wants.
Hello, Chicago. How are you this Saturday? I want you to know that at our Facebook page, we will have the clip that we just played from the verdict, as well as the whole movie of the
Please
verdict.
listen to it because it's really apropos today.
And our Facebook page is facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Bridges with a Y as well. If you have any questions for the show, for yourself, 224-513-1231. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and break into my question because I think it's pertinent to where you're going here. So one of the questions that I kind of get over and over again, I'm underwater. My home's worth about $220, and my mortgage is about $280. I'm not behind on my payments, but I've been trying to get a modification because my interest rate is a little high. The bank has been making me submit and resubmit the modification documents over and over again for nearly a year, and I still don't have a modification. What would you do different for me, or what would an attorney do?
What we would do is we have people that are totally familiar with the regulations, and that's what it gets down to following the regulations because the banks aren't. The banks are just the servicers of the mortgage. They don't want you to have a more modification. The banks are charging about $300 per month to service a loan in foreclosure, and they get about $10 a month for every loan that's performing. Now, if you're Wells Fargo, for example, and you're servicing $7 million mortgages, Wells Fargo is making $3.6 billion a year on mortgages in foreclosure because of the servicing. But keep in mind, these banks don't own, not a one of these mortgages is owned by any of these banks. They are the servicer. They are also the trustee of the trust, maybe, that owns the mortgage, but the bank itself doesn't own the mortgage. Now, the Paul Newman thing, I want to get back to that. It's very important. We have it printed out. He says, so much of the time we are just lost. We don't know what to do. We said, what is true? The thing is, it all comes down to the truth and lies. You're underwater because there was an appraisal that was puffed up because, a mortgage-backed security is 2,500 mortgages. 2,500 mortgages at $200,000 comes to $500 million. A 1% commission for Goldman Sachs is $5 million. 2,500 mortgages of $300,000 is $750 million. 1% commission is $7.5 million. And that's a difference of $2.5 million. When you're putting together 2 or 3 of those every day, you're talking about $10 million, $5 to $10 million per day in a difference of commissions. Not to mention that when you have 2,500 mortgages of $300,000 on a bunch of homes that are worth $150,000, you're going to have a massive number of defaults and foreclosures. And then when you can see the future on Wall Street, when you can see the future, you can really make big money. And that's where they made the big money. And that's where the bailout was. The banks were not bailed out. They were given money as an incentive to try to stimulate the economy. AIG, who was selling the credit default swaps, was bailed out. And AIG was bailed out so fast because there were so many claims on the credit default swaps that they didn't have the money. And AIG is too big to fail because they insure most of the shipping and aviation in the world. And if they had been allowed to fail, well, there could have been global famine of a biblical scale. So AIG's bailed out, and AIG pays off all its credit default swaps because an insurance company has to make good, including all the credit default swaps that Goldman Sachs had bought that had no skin in the game. Because you know where Henry Paulson got his first job out of business school? That's right, Goldman Sachs. And it was Henry Paulson who whispered in George Bush's ear that they, AIG, are too big to fail. And, they needed to be bailed out, but they didn't need to pay off all the credit default swaps that Goldman Sachs had bought because Goldman Sachs had bought them on the same mortgage-backed securities that they had put together. And that's why Fabrice Tourre was convicted of 6 or 7 counts, because it's a fraud. It's a lie. And we got to get past the lies. And that's what Paul Newman says. It's so much, he says, tell us what is right. Tell us what is true, or there is no justice. The rich win, the poor are powerless. We become tired of hearing people lie. And after a time, we become dead. We think of ourselves as victims, and we become victims. We become weak. We doubt ourselves. We doubt our beliefs. We doubt our institutions, and we doubt the law. But today, you, the jury, are the law. You are the law, not some book, not the lawyers, not the marble statue or the trappings of the court. See, these are just symbols of what we aspire to be. They are, in fact, a prayer, a fervent but frightened prayer. In my religion, he says, they say, act as if ye had faith, and faith will be given to you. And if we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe in it with ourselves and act with justice. It all comes down to the truth versus the lies. And the truth is, you're not in this situation because of anything you did wrong. You're in this situation because you were a victim. Don't just be a victim. Don't give up. Don't be dead. Yes, I'm tired of hearing the lies too. So, you know how you fight the lies is with the truth. And when you have that in your shield, when you have that in your, I tell my young attorneys, we have but one weapon. Yes, we're going up against the banks. They have all the money and the lawyers. We have but one weapon, and that's all we need. We have the truth. And that makes us invincible, because the truth will win out. I'm Lou Brydges. Stick with us. We'll be back in a minute.
We now return to the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Brydges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
It's all about the truth and the lies, and I forgot to mention here, this past week, 2 big cases in Illinois that are very, very helpful to us. And one is, I've said we have a broad front strategy, depending on what you want to do with the property. But to save your home program, so to speak, we defend a foreclosure lawsuit. We get an audit where we have evidence. We file affirmative defenses, interrogatories, request for production documents, request to admit. The banks can't go anywhere with the foreclosure lawsuit. And now we're going to start filing counterclaims based on the Consumer Fraud Act, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, the Fair Debt Credit Reporting Act. But at the same time, I've got a whole slew of paralegals that do nothing but process the applications for modification with restructuring and make sure that all the regulations, every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and that the banks don't just out of hand to reject them. There's a process, a regulatory HAMP program that they're supposed to follow. And they don't. I mean, the whistleblowers that I talked about in several shows, they point out that these applications are just stacked in a corner, and then they have a day, they call it the Blitz Day, where they just go through and arbitrarily just reject them all. Because they're not following the process. They don't want you into modification. You think Wells Fargo services 7 million mortgages. If 1 million are those if 7 million are performing, they get about 70 million a month, about $10 per mortgage. If 1 million are in foreclosure, they get about $300 per mortgage. 300 times 1 million is 300 million. They get about 300 million for that 1 million alone. So that's 300 plus these 60 million and the others. A difference of $300 million multiplied by 12 months comes to $3.6 billion per year in revenues. That is why the HAMP program was an abject failure, is because they were sabotaged. But there are regulations, and when you read those fine print and those regulations, at least you have paralegals that do it, and you make do it, and when they reject an application, why? What was the NPV? What was the LTV? What was the, and then also there's the changed circumstances. That was the case, the Johnson case that came down to the Second District this week. If you've been rejected for a mortgage application, you can modification. I'm sorry. If you've been rejected for an application for mortgage modification, you can, if there's a changed circumstance, and the regulation, the term changed circumstance, you can reapply. Well, a changed circumstance, maybe you got a job, maybe you're making more money, maybe, but also the changed circumstance that I've come up with, quite frankly, and I'll share this with all the other attorneys, the home was overappraised. Get together with one of those attorneys that does the property tax appeals. And where there's a property tax appeal pending that's going to reduce the property taxes, which is no cost to the homeowner, these attorneys charge a percentage of what they save you the first year. They get usually 50% of what they save you the first year in property taxes. So every one of our clients, we're working with a real estate, a property tax attorney to make a property tax appeal, if you're underwater, to reduce the property taxes. So that's a changed circumstance, because that's going to change your property taxes are going to be less. You're going to have more money that can be a mortgage. Now maybe you come within the percentages. So your whole application for modification needs to be reevaluated. We have all kinds of little things like that, because if you just sit down and think about this and concentrate your practice in this, you come up with these kind of things. Not only will you be saving money on your taxes, but it's a changed circumstance that allows you to resubmit for a modification with restructuring. The thing is, never give up the land. That property, the value of that property comes from you and your husband and your wife caring for the land, and growing the grass and planting the things and making the cute little stone fences and white picket fences, and because the value of the land comes with the person who tills it. That's why the theme of our show is All Along the Watchtower. That's why our theme song is. I don't know if anyone's caught that. And there's a new a cover of All Along the Watchtower done by this guy Devlin that we're going to add to the show. But if you listen to the words to that song written by Bob Dylan, and I always have liked the Jimi Hendrix version the best, and that's why it's the opening song in our show. But there must be some way out of here, says the Joker. He's joking because he thinks that the bank's going to do something for him. He thinks that they're going to play fair, said the Joker to the thief. And that's what these Wall Street banks are, is thieves. But there must be some way out of here. Businessmen drink my wine, plowmen dig my earth, but none of them anywhere along the line know what any of it is worth. And then the thief said, no reason to get excited. The thief, he kindly spoke. There are many here among us that just think that life is but a joke. But you and I have been through that, and this is not our fate. So let's stop talking falsely now. The lies. The hour is getting late. No more lies. It all comes down to the truth and the lies. All along the watchtower, the princes keep their view, while all their women, all their whores come and go, and their barefoot servants too. But outside in the distance, a wildcat has growled, and riders are approaching, and the wind begins to howl, because we are going to have a change. We are going to have justice. We need only to have faith in ourselves, as Frank Calvin says. Act as if you have faith, and faith will be given to you. And if we ever have faith in justice, we need only to believe in ourselves. And we only need to ask for something that is fair and just, and that is that you pay a fair mortgage on this home based on the true fair market value, not the inflated fair market value, or not the inflated appraised value that the banks put on it, because we all know those appraisals were jerry-rigged, because the originators were getting such huge commissions for originating loans. The bigger the loan, the more likely it would fail, the bigger commission they got. So this whole thing was a stack of lies, but the lies are falling apart now, and the truth is coming out. Fight for truth and justice. We'll be there with you. Get an attorney who does it. Suleiman's doing a good job. My friend, 2 attorneys that worked for Cadillus, one of the big foreclosure mills, have opened their own shop on the other side. And I said to Raj Judala today, I said, Raj, I'm so proud of you, and you're doing something now that you can be proud of, and your grandchildren can be proud of, because these banks are what Thomas Jefferson said, it's all about, it's all about truth and justice. And if you've got the truth, you've got an audit, you've got an investigative report, you've got the facts, you've got the truth, and you just have to have faith.
Welcome back to the Lou Brydges Show with Louis Brydges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back, listeners. In the last segment, I never fully answered my question about if you're underwater, you're not behind in your mortgage, but you'd like to do something. You're overpaying by, $1,000 a month, but you don't want to damage your credit and you don't want to just go into default. Is there something that we can do for you? Well, yes, what we do is it's kind of a look-see. It's a peek. The auditors won't give us a full investigative report because, he wants to get his he needs to be paid. But we pay him a reduced rate, half of what an audit normally costs, which is only about $1,000. So we pay him $500. We get sort of a summary of what he does the investigation, and he gives us a summary. It's not something I can use in court because it's just sort of conclusory. It doesn't have the backup documentation and the websites and the references and all the stuff I need for a foundation to maybe get admissible evidence in court. But he says, this is what I found. I found that this mortgage wasn't properly transferred, that the trust had closed when the purported transfer. That's a void transfer under New York law. Therefore, it's still owned by the intermediary SPV, and which means that the bank that's been trying to collect the debt has been trying to collect the debt with on behalf of an entity that doesn't own the mortgage, and they have no service agreement with the SPV, which means they violated the Fair Debt Collection. I add all the legal stuff. He just gives me the from the databases that he. And he pays $1,000 a month for the access to the Bloomberg terminal where we get all this information. It's a very, very sophisticated forensic and securitization investigation. But there are auditors out there that are scams, like anything else. There's attorneys out there that are scamming people. And anybody who charges you for a loan modification assistance that's not an attorney, they can't do that in Illinois. And any of these national outfits that you call that's going to refer you an attorney, that's not right either. Because if the attorney's paying someone for referrals, that ain't right. And if the attorney's splitting fees with this outfit, that ain't right. You can't do that in Illinois. We at Brydges O&O Associates try to do everything as above board as possible. It's above board. Totally. And we just feel that if you do the right thing for the right reasons, you don't have to worry about anything else. The money will fall in place. And if it doesn't, well, at least you've done the right thing for the right reasons. You always got that going for you. But as it turns out, when you have skills and talents and abilities like Scott O, my partner, who's a brilliant attorney, and myself, I try to keep up. When you do the right thing for the right reasons, and the right reason isn't just to make money, it's to help your people of your tribe. I'm a big fan. You all know that regular listeners. I'm a big fan of Native American Indians and their culture, and the Lakota Sioux. I've spent a lot of time out in the Dakotas and around with the Lakota Sioux, and they have a saying that when the strength of the wolf is in the pack, and the strength of the pack is in the wolf. So, thank you for joining us. If you have
any questions, 224-513-1231. Don't forget our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Lou Brydges Show. That's Brydges with a Y. Join us there.
And if we are to have faith in justice, we need only to believe in ourselves and act with justice. I believe there's justice in our hearts. And this past week, it's been proven in New York. Today, the jury was the law, and the Goldman Sachs trader and Goldman Sachs were found guilty of greed. I'm Lou Brydges. This is the Lou Brydges Show. Never give up the land. Fight for truth and justice, and you'll never be alone in this country.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of the Lou Brydges Show with attorney Louis Brydges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Brydges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Call 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. Or visit FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Get real answers from a real foreclosure defense firm and discover the legal tools at your disposal. Tune into AM 560 The Answer next Saturday morning at 8 for the Lou Brydges Show, telling the truth about foreclosure.